Welcome back. This is a long-awaited installment by like two of you who remember the only other installment of this session breakdown series that I've done. This is a new track, just came out this Friday, which was yesterday. It's all kind of a blur at this point. But yeah, it just came out yesterday. This is under my Lost Art of Surrender. It's a new moniker that's a little bit more aggressive, kind of a synth rock, Nine Inch Nails inspired kind of one-man band, I guess. We're going to jump right on into the session now and kind of see what it looks like. So here we are. You can see it's I did this one in Ableton. Nothing incredibly complex here as far as track count. I think we've got like, what's that, 31? Yeah, 31 tracks total. And a lot of it is just like a little kind of ear candy stuff throughout. Like, whoop, that's not soloed. Yeah, so just like a little squelches and risers. So I think a great place to start. Let's go ahead and pop this whole thing open. A good place to start might be the thing that I did first that kind of inspired this whole thing. I wrote it around this kind of idea. This main synth right here is the Novation Peak, which I ran through the Korg MS-20, which I have right over there, down there. Great synth that I don't really use that much anymore as a synth. I just kind of use it as a sound processor now. I just run everything that I can think of through its filters, and it all sounds amazing. A little noisy, but amazing. So this is the Peak, a colder sounding digital synthesizer that I ran through the analog filters of the MS-20, and that sounded like this. This was the very first idea that I played in. This is what started the whole track. So as that continues on, I just layered some more Peak stuff over the top of it. Same thing, I ran all of this through the MS-20. This little counter melody idea started to come in. Got that panned right. The great thing about recording all this stuff in mono is you can choose a specific place for it to go, right? And you don't get all these phasing issues that you can run into when you're trying to pan stereo sources around. And then I stacked this on top. It's just a drone that comes in. Also the Peak. Panned hard left. So we got one dead center, one kind of 50% right, and one hard left at this point. And these continue pretty much throughout, and they kind of build in intensity. And this is the core of the track. This is what it was all built around. See, we're into the chorus now. I'm actually... What I remember, I could be wrong. So it doesn't seem too crazy, but when you add in all of the Pro 3 stuff, it gets pretty gnarly, right? Cut out a little spot there just to have some space for that to come through. Kind of coming from a more ambient background, making a lot of ambient music. One thing that I've discovered since kind of venturing into this style a bit more is, and this has also helped my ambient work, is that having less can be really powerful, can really add clarity to a mix, right? And when we think big ambient tracks, we think like, oh, reverbs for everyone, right? But, I started using reverbs on synths and EQing out reverbs so that they don't have too much frequency buildup, and kind of like I mentioned with having instruments in mono. Then when you start to layer things, everything, you carve out a place for it and it goes into that slot. And then when other things come in, it's actually a lot more impactful, and you still maintain that kind of clarity that I've always enjoyed in a mix. Okay, going back to the beginning, the first sounds that you hear is one of those peak. Obviously, I wrote this main line here and just kind of improvised it all the way through, and then I just layered around it, right? So the first thing that you hear is this peak, and I believe there's a Pro 3. Yeah, this is actually the very first thing you hear. And that's Pro 3 with, I'm pretty sure the resonance really cranked on that. I don't remember which filter I was using on the Pro 3. It's probably the 4-pole OTA, if I had to guess, because you can get really squelchy with that one, but it doesn't. All the bottom end doesn't totally drop out like a ladder filter. And that kind of continues throughout. And I was just playing with the frequency, the filter frequency, with the resonance really cranked. And so when the filter frequency would line up with the note, and kind of clash in a certain way, that's what I like to play with. And I do the same thing on the MS-20's filters, because you got those two peaks that you can play with the filter resonance on the MS-20. Create some really interesting harmonics. Yeah. This Pro 3 sequence that comes in, just using the onboard sequencer in the Pro 3 and the built-in distortion, you can see there's really not a lot of extra stuff. Some EQ, just carving out a space for everything. But yeah, I don't have any extra distortion on this Pro 3. That thing just screams right on its own. You can hear that sequence. It builds and builds as I open up the filter. All that distortion there. I think there's some panning going on with the sequencer too. So you get that distortion spreading things out to either side. This pan dead center, but there is panning happening in the synth itself. Yeah, so as far as distortion goes, I did have a question on Instagram about what distortions I used. It was primarily like onboard stuff from the Pro 3, which does a fine job, and running stuff through the MS-20, which you can kind of overdrive the input to get some added distortion, and also play with those filter resonance peaks to get some really screamy, squelchy stuff that I've got going on in there. Another question that I've gotten about this particular track is how did I do the tape speed effects of the narrated spoken word stuff at the beginning, which was all done in one take into this very dictaphone right here. Okay, so don't know what that was, but I think it's dying, so it does some tape speed variations right by itself with no input from me whatsoever. But it was a combination of the speed on that varying, and what you really probably pick up on is I've got a delay send, which is just, let's see, it's just Echo Boy. It's Echo Boy, and that is being very heavily automated. We can see that. I just drew in some curves, right? And I should probably solo that so we can hear it.
It was all so clear back then, black and white. Now everything has faded away, faded to gray.
So you can see I'm playing with the echo time and the feedback.
No one really has anything to say.
This is on AM radio mode, which I wanted a really lo-fi, which is, it's already lo-fi, it's a dictaphone, right? But I wanted it to be super lo-fi, so I went with this kind of nasty AM radio, lots of saturation. I don't think I did anything else really to
I
that.
don't think I can stay here
A
anymore.
little bit of roll off on the lows and the highs.
Nowhere.
Just kind of finding sweet spots where I like the feedback time, where it would I would ramp up the feedback time at the end of a phrase and kind of play with the speed to taste, right? So I drew in a lot of this, and then I would go in and kind of adjust some things if I didn't like what was happening. So yeah, so it ends up sounding kind of random, but I actually did kind of go through and and kind of micromanage what was happening there. Comes back at the end. There's a little bit in the chorus.
You can't go back to the way things were.
Yeah, and you can actually hear, because I actually recorded this into this very microphone, as a matter of fact, just from the speaker. So you can hear the tape, rolling.
As time passes by, I can barely recall why I came here in the first place.
It pretty much doesn't do any other frequencies besides this anyway, but I just rolled everything else off just to make sure that we were isolating what I wanted. A little decapitator. Oh, a lot of decapitator actually on blown speaker. So I just really, I was just kidding. I did a lot to this as far as adding distortion and stuff. So rolled off the highs and the lows, got a lot around like just below 1K here. And yeah, really cranked decapitator. Without it,
In the first place. Now everything has faded away.
it just loses the edge. Yeah, and I actually wanted to hear the tape turning,
Have you felt it? Something has happened.
Yeah. The chorus vocals, really, really simple. I'm always super self-conscious about my vocals because I'm not a singer. But it's just a double track vocal. I panned one about 50% left, one 50% right, and it sounded like
Things
this.
were much better from what I remember. I could be wrong. Seems so much
So this was all there was at the beginning.
when I wasn't looking. It's been so long.
Yeah, those ideas came first. I think the lyrics changed throughout because I'm never happy with lyrics, my own lyrics anyway. So yeah, I'm sure the lyrics changed somewhat. I know they did. I didn't tune it because, no auto tune, nothing like that. You can see the whole vocal chain down here. I obviously rolled off a lot of lows. Gave it a little bump here, a bump there. Decapitator again. Just to give it a little extra edge. And it's actually being sent to both that very same tape delay, Echo Boy, and the Valhalla vintage reverb, which, there's a setting for that. Pretty good size decay time for a lead vocal. But I thought it sat in the mix pretty well. So, and then obviously rolled off some of the lows on the reverb itself. Okay, now getting into some of the Pro 3 elements a little bit more. I think I touched on the sequence. Here we've got some risers. Which once again, just rolled off all the bottom just for that sizzle. And I'm automating the pan here, so you can hear it go. across your speakers, or headphones, hopefully. Yeah. So all together,
Have you felt it? Something is happening.
just adds a little bit of a menacing quality.
Nothing is the same.
And it is.
Things were much better.
And then we're into the chorus. Pardon me. I'm terribly sorry about that. I actually just changed mic stands, so hopefully you can hear me better, but I'll try not to smack you right in the mouth again. My apologies. The bass. Everyone wants to know. Well, actually, no one asked about the bass, so I assume none of you want to know, but I'm going to tell you anyway what I did on the bass for this, okay? Very simple. We have 2 layers of Pro 3, which make up the bass. It's my go-to bass synth anyway. This is the sub. You won't hear this if you're watching it on your phone or something, why would you do that anyway? Seriously, I would like an answer to that. Why would you watch a track session breakdown, whatever I call this series, that doesn't really exist because there have only been 2? Why would you watch that on your phone? I don't understand. If you're listening on good speakers or your headphones, you might pick this up. It's just a sub, and you can see that I've tried to isolate. I rolled off the super lows that no one needs, and all the highs, which there weren't a lot anyway. It's really just a sub. And what is this? Oh, you know what? I've actually got the low frequencies, everything below 93, arbitrary number that I chose. 93 hertz here is side chaining from the kick. Okay, so anytime the kick hits, it just knocks that bass right out of the way so it has a place to sit. Because the kick is actually pretty... You can see it's occupying that kind of, I don't know, 38, 37 hertz. That's pretty deep. And it's got a pretty good bump on it. Let's see if... Yeah. Okay, so we'll get to the drums in a bit, but I want to continue on with what I was talking about. It's just a true rarity for me. So yeah, that's the foundation. That's the guts of the bass. But really, the oomph and the character of the bass comes from this high part, which may seem like it's panning around from one side to the other, and that's because I'm panning it around from one side to the other. Now, why would you do that with a bass track? Well, because we have this particular sub bass handling all of the low frequency information. Therefore, I rolled all of that off. We don't need any of that on this high part, which then frees me up to pan it to my heart's delight. So this is very distorted Pro 3 grit at its finest. Together. You felt that kick back in if you've got a sub. And then with all of the Pro 3 stuff together... Oh, that reminds me. This lead, which I forgot to talk about at the end. Which I've called the Gnarl ARP. I don't know why. I did, though. This one is panned hard right. And it comes in panned hard left. Now these, I'm pretty sure I cheated. I didn't double track this. I simply duplicated it. But a great thing to do, because if you just duplicate something and pan it, fine, whatever, but it's just going to sound louder, assuming that it's in phase. If it's not in phase, you have a whole other set of problems. But if you keep all of the frequencies exactly the same, they're just going to double up each other. So it's just going to appear louder. And I really wanted this to sound a little different in character, and that's what gives you the width. It's like, oh, my ears are trying to balance out what they're hearing on both extremes of the stereo spectrum. Spectrum? Sure. So this is Micro Freak. I grab Micro Freak, and it detunes stuff as much as you want, and in this case, I wanted much. And it also does some kind of weird thing with the timing where it's delayed, a little bit. Different styles here. This is just what I went with. I usually just play around with these settings to taste, depending on the application. So when that one comes in, you'll also notice I did some different EQ stuff to make it stand out even more. It should sound... It's got a different character to it. It makes it sound really wide. Okay, so those are just using the arpeggiator on the Pro 3 and lots of onboard distortion. Pro 3 is great if you want a synth that can get nasty really fast. It does it really well. Sometimes too well. It's like I'll start out to try to do something that's nice and soothing, and it becomes angry and aggressive. So fortunately, I have two projects now that are very different, so I can just name it something else and move on with my life. Yeah, you can drive the oscillators really hard into the filter. You can drive the filter itself, and then there's an analog distortion at the end of the signal chain, which sounds awesome. The filters can get really squelchy if you crank the resonance. And, oh, there it is. Oh, yeah, and the tuned feedback, which is really unique. And I'm going to be honest, I don't use that a ton, but it's like a very specific carpal strong, carpal tunnel something strong. I don't know. Type of sound that it creates. It's nice on some things, but it can get really ugly in a not so good way, in my opinion. So I use it sparingly, but everything else, yeah, I love that synth. So if we listen to that solo with the other Pro 3 stuff besides the bass, we can hear and you can see where I carved out these little spaces to put these little, I don't know how to describe these, but you'll know them when you hear them. It's like panned around and just little ear candies that just make you go, oh, that pops out, and it's a little more interesting than if they just weren't there. Yeah, so that's that. Okay, on to the drums, the last element. Like I said, not a ton of tracks, not a ton of things going on, but hopefully arranged in a way that's kind of interesting. This was originally a drum loop that I don't even remember what the loop was, and I have since deleted it, apparently. So yeah, I don't have the original loop even in this session. to play for you, which is a shame. I do apologize for that. But all I did was, I sliced it up using probably simpler in Ableton and dropped that into a drum rack, which is one of my favorite things about Ableton. And then didn't name any of these slices so that I actually could, tell you what is happening now. But yeah, you can kind of see what's going on. I literally just finger drummed this in with my MIDI controller, which is down here, and I don't think you can see. Oh, almost, kind of. So yeah, it's kind of, I didn't quantize it either, because I wanted it to sound almost like a real drummer, maybe with bad timing, played it, which I definitely rush the fills sometimes, and it still kind of bothers me to this day, but I didn't want it to sound too mechanical. Because even though it's chopped up and you can tell that it's not a drummer, it does still have kind of an organic bass. So it's this weird dichotomy of like, oh, it came from something organic, and then a non-drummer chopped it up in a sequencer, but then he played it poorly into his MIDI keyboard. So for the kit itself, when it comes in, you can hear that's got some sizzle on it, and it's a combination of a lot of different things. Decapitator, because Decapitator is awesome. Isotope Trash 2, which I will now bring into frame so that you can see it. Just a little bit of that, actually. This is a great plugin, though, if you're looking for a good distortion plugin. This is basically the same, just with a little more drive, I think. Yeah, I've got way too many plugins on this, but, it happens. A little compression. Shaperbox, I don't remember what that is. Oh, yeah. The Shaperbox is doing all of that weird, like, timing stuff on the high frequencies, so it sounds, you hear that flutter. So if I take that out, what does it sound like? It's fine, but it's not as interesting as this, which is doing its own rhythmic thing, and you can actually divide it up by frequency, which is really cool. So, yeah, there's a little like time stop, time slow down effect thing going on there, and then a little bit crushing going on rhythmically here as well. So, that little hi-hat kind of sort of thing, I just soloed that out into a different track so that I had a little bit more control over it. The great thing about Drum Rack is, you can go into each one of these and put an EQ on each one. So like the kick has its own EQ. Where are the other ones? You should really name your drum slices, kids. Yeah, so the snare has its own thing going on. So you can do your whole effects chain for each and every sample that you put in the Drum Rack, which is really cool. It's basically kick and snare, isn't it? And then there's some EQ and compression that goes on the whole drum track there. Okay, this is on the whole master bus for the kick. Got track spacer, which I believe, yeah, that's coming from the vocal. So if we listen to that,
Things were much better.
it's not doing a lot. It's literally just knocking out some of this kind of
From what
mid-range. A little tiny bit, 6%.
be wrong seems so much clearer.
yeah, so that's that. And I think with that, we have covered everything in here. Again, it's not a lot. Really, it became about the arrangement with this one in particular, right? Choosing a few elements that sound really good on their own and then not adding too much to it so as not to cover up those elements that I really liked the sound of, which is something I'm learning more and more, is maybe don't add so much stuff. Also, carving out space for things to live. That's been something that I've been also learning really in the last couple years with my mixes. I feel like they've gotten stronger. I'm not saying I'm a world-class mix engineer or producer by any stretch of the imagination, but personally for me, it's really helped my mixes to think about carving out space for things. Don't drown everything in reverb. Put your reverbs on Synths. EQ out the parts that you don't need. That's the great thing about having reverbs on Synths is you can then go in and you can actually put, compression and different EQs and things on your reverbs and delays and all of that. So I think that's about enough for today. I think we've broken this thing down as much as we possibly can. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've taken something from this, and I hope that you will share it with all your friends and either say, hey, I learned something from this, or hey, look at this guy. What an idiot. If you have any more questions about the track that I didn't touch on, leave me a comment down below. If you do have any more questions or anything that I didn't touch on today, leave me a comment below and I will certainly get back to you. And you might as well subscribe and like, but please don't enable notifications. That's just seems a bit needy. One reason that I don't do more of these is I just never know quite how to end them.